You've spent years building marketing expertise, but what if you could deploy it across multiple companies without the politics or the single company ceiling? I'm Kelly Callahan Poe, host of the Marketing Moms podcast. Today's episode is called How to Become a Fractional CMO with Javier Lozano Jr. Javier is the founder of Boulder Media Company and a fractional CMO with 20 plus years of experience turning marketing chaos into revenue driving systems. He launched and sold his first business during the Great Recession, then scaled a tech company from 1 to 20 million plus in under 4 years. Today, he partners with B2B companies to build the marketing frameworks, positioning, and demand generation systems that create predictable growth. He's also the co-author of an Amazon best-selling book and hosts the Predictable B2B Growth podcast. Welcome, Javier.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. Really excited about this.
I'm happy to learn about this because this is a topic that I've been curious about myself because it's an area to explore where a lot of marketers who are mid or senior executive who want to kind of move into post corporate. So for people who've never heard the term, how do you explain what going fractional actually means?
There's a couple of ways on how you can look at it, but the biggest thing is that you are essentially getting a leader that strategically is going to bring what they have done over the past several years, but you're not going to have them on full time as a full FTE, if you will. And so this is a great solution for companies that are possibly like in a way of like they don't want to invest completely into like a true CMO or true CFO, if you will. But they want their knowledge, they want their strategy, and then more importantly, they want to know that they can have someone come in and execute it quicker, because if they bring in someone more mid-tier, it could take a little bit longer. And then you have the less commitment. You don't have that like full, you have to pay them like the full salary, the benefits, all those other things. So it's more of the strategic side that they bring to the table at a fraction of the cost in a fraction of the time.
And so how would you say this is different from a marketing consultant or hiring an agency or just, I mean, I understand hiring a full-time marketing leader and the additional cost for that, but how would this be different from hiring as a consultant, for example?
I think they're really, really different because a consultant is not going to be really embedded into the leadership team. A fractional CMO is going to be embedded into the team. They're going to be in the leadership meetings on Monday mornings, if you will. They're going to be, reporting the wins and losses of marketing. A consultant is going to probably be coming in, like kind of telling you what to do. Like, here are some things that you should probably be doing. And then they just kind of walk away and expect you to do that. An agency on the other side of it is going to be more tactical and execution. And so you might hire an agency for, SEO, or you might hire an agency to run Google ads. And those are great. Those aren't bad things. However, what you really need is you need a strategy that is led by someone that has done this before. And then they either know how to pick the right kind of agencies or the right type of support to execute. Some other fractionals are able to actually execute as well too. So like, as an example, if you're going through a branding and positioning kind of strategy and building that out, a lot of fractionals should be able to know how to do that, so they can actually do that themselves, as opposed to bringing somebody like an agency to kind of build that piece. But they may not be able to do the ads, because that is a kind of a tactical lever that you got to pull. And that's kind of the biggest differences in how I look at it, is that a fractional is going to come in with a strategy and they should be able to execute a lot of these options. And the consultants are going to be kind of like more of like ideas and concepts and then step away. Agencies are going to be more tactical and getting in there onto the nitty gritty, if you will.
So what sort of companies do you think hire fractionals? Is it more of the startups and the younger companies versus, the larger companies that have a lot more resources?
I think it's a variety. I see it across the board where there's some fractionals that are getting embedded into like pre-seed, or like they've got a little bit of like product market fit. They've got, some momentum going, very founder led. So the founder is like, getting some things going, like they're getting meetings, they're booking calls, they're doing some sales, they're scrappy, but the founder is so in the weeds that they don't have time to step back and be strategic. And so has nothing to do that they can't do it. It's that like they're trying to make some money out of this thing, And so that's where I see sometimes where it works very well, where the founder's like, okay, I'm doing great. We've got some momentum going. I need a strategist that knows how to run this playbook or build a custom playbook for our team. So that's one spectrum. Another one is where there's like misalignment between sales and marketing. So they've already kind of grown a little bit. They're scaling at $2, $3, $4 million a year, et cetera. They're growing at, maybe not at the hockey stick kind of approach that you see for a lot of tech startups, but they're growing, they're scaling. But what's going on is like sales and marketing aren't really aligned. They're having a hard time creating more predictable pipeline, where it's just like, how do we create more predictability? Like we've got these things that are working, like people are finding us and they're buying, but like we can't we can't forecast revenue. And so what's happening is that these companies are kind of like in these tipping points, or they need a bridge to get to that next level. So if you want to put like dollars to it, I would say anywhere from about $1 million to maybe about 15 or 20 million. But I would also argue that even above that, there are some great opportunities, because it doesn't mean that if you have a VP of marketing or a CMO that they're not doing well. This other fractional can just bring another perspective that you're not aware of. And they can kind of be another sounding board, if you will. So I don't want to kind of like pigeonhole it that's only for like $1 million to 20 million. But what I'm saying is that those are some of the signals that you can kind of find that gives you an opportunity to be like, I could possibly come in and help you.
As an employer, how do you find fractional CMOs? I mean, are you finding them mostly word of mouth or through LinkedIn? Because that's got to be tough to find ones that have the experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ones. I mean, for myself, I'm looking at networking and essentially finding my way to start talking to more leaders, CEOs, founders, sometimes like even COOs and CROs. So that's one part. So either it's a networking event or it's me networking on LinkedIn and having these kind of meetings that are just kind of allowing me to kind of introduce myself. Other times there's going to be opportunities where like PEs or VCs, or if you have the right kind of connections there, because they have a portfolio and they're going to want their portfolio companies to be doing well. If you have the right connections there, you could obviously make introductions and they can give you some inroads to kind of help other companies at a like one-to-many of approach, if you will. So those are kind of some of the ways of kind of getting into it. But other times it's just truly your network. It's getting into your network and letting people know, that, hey, I've ventured into the fractional world. This is what I'm doing. If you have any questions, I'm happy to kind of answer that. And that's kind of how I've gotten some of my early successes as well too, is really just kind of diving into my network and just letting people know what I'm doing now today. So it's just I'm not going to say this one way of finding a fractional. It's different ways. And in marketing, you don't just have like, one trick pony kind of strategy that's going to get you to succeed in your strategy that you're trying to launch. It's these different little things that you're putting out there, and every little piece of bait is going to help kind of bring those opportunities inbound.
Got it. And so for a marketing executive who's considering this path, what do they need in place before they can go fractional? How do they position themselves to be able to get a fractional position?
Yeah, so I would say a few things. I think some of us have to take a step back and say, like, do you really want to be a fractional? Because this is the challenge that a lot of us kind of have to think about, is that it's not just like doing marketing and that's it. You're also doing business development. You're also doing sales. You're also doing all these other things that you don't typically do in-house, because when you're in-house, you don't have to sell. You're basically focused on a strategic, approach for marketing and building the go-to-market and those strategies along those lines. You're helping with customer success, you're supporting sales. That's one piece. The other piece, that you don't have to touch is the sales and business development, because they have team already involved in that. And so when you're going fractional, you have to actually take a step back and say, okay, I love this concept of actually helping a lot of other businesses and helping kind of, coach and build strategy and being embedded into different companies. That sounds great and amazing. But then you have to ask yourself, are you willing to put yourself out there? Are you willing to go network? Are you willing to do business development? Are you willing to go sell and pitch and basically have a smaller pipeline than what you're used to? Because really, like, you don't need a ton of pipeline. Like, you only really need 2 or 3 clients to be relatively successful. So you don't need a ton of pipeline. And so, like, there's these different trade-offs that you have to think about. And so it's not that I'm discouraging fractional. It's just more of like, let's put some light into the other areas that a lot of folks are not really talking about. They talk about the glorious things about being a fractional and being embedded into different companies, but they're not talking about, like, you've got to network a lot. And if you're an introvert, then guess what? You're going to have to kind of put yourself out there.
Yeah. Well, what are the skill sets that companies are looking for in fractionals, or what are the skill sets that you tout on your end as a fractional yourself? Is there a certain number of years, or is there a certain number of, obviously having experience in the industry would help?
Yeah.
But
This is like if you've built systems and frameworks within a company in-house, and you can actually deploy that and repeat that repeatedly. So like you said, hey, this is an example. Like I'll use myself as an example. I essentially helped, get our ICP more clarified. At one point, we were generating for every 100 leads, only 15 of them were in our ICP. Eventually, we got that to where for every 100 leads, 95 of them were in our ICP. So if you have a repeatable system that you've developed that's going to work over and over and over, that's a signal. Another example is like, I created some life cycle campaigns that were generating anywhere from about $1.5 million to $2 million a year by how we were using and building our lake of leads, and then how we were converting them down the funnel. Again, like that's a repeatable system. And so if you have some systems that you've built or frameworks that you've built that have shown you some success, I believe those are ways of like saying like, hey, I can actually do this. The other part is that you have to be very aligned with revenue. So as a marketing leader, and I think today more so than ever, a marketing leader should be tied to the hip with sales. And so if you have had some great success, on how you and sales have actually created some wins and built a go-to-market strategy, and you're like, this is becoming like not just like a one-hit wonder kind of thing. It wasn't just like a one song hit and it just kind of rocked it. This is something that like it's worked, and you believe that you can kind of like productize that, then that's another way of kind of putting it. So I wouldn't say that you have to have like an X amount of years of experience, but you have to have some sort of signals that have shown you that, hey, I've done these things. I can repeat this. I can deploy this. Now that playbook's not going to run, seamlessly across all companies, but it's something that you can say, like, I can take this little recipe here. I can take this ingredient here. I can take this right here, and we can deploy that into your company.
what is the typical length of a project as a fractional CMO? I mean, is it project-based? Is it solving a problem? Is it a period of time?
The answer that everyone hates in marketing is it depends.
Yeah.
So like everyone always asks you a question in marketing is like, well, it just depends. And I think it kind of depends on this one because every engagement's a little different. I do think that you do need to have a set product of like, this is how we start engagement. This is how we continue engagement. This is what offboarding looks like. You should have that kind of like pre-planned. And so I'll kind of paint the picture and then kind of like say, but you're going to have to also be flexible because some clients might only need you for a project and then realize that they're like, you know what? You crushed it on this project. We need you for strategy now. Yeah. So like, don't be married to one or the other because some projects open opportunities to full-time retainer, not full-time, but more like retainer type base. So this is kind of how I would look at it is some clients might come in and they need to have an overhaul. And so you might go in and kind of do like a 360 analysis or a go-to-market audit on their entire business. That takes 3 or 4 weeks. You have to analyze everything from like their go-to-market, what they're doing on their website, interview customers, interview current team members that are part of like the revenue part of it, go through their HubSpot. You're analyzing everything. So that right there, you got to pay for because like the thing is like, I'm pretty sure no one has done that. So that's one engagement. Other times it could be a workshop where you sit down with a CEO and maybe like a couple of other leaders and you build a playbook together. And so you can do a workshop in a half day or a full day. That seems to be really great for some CEOs because it's a one-time expense. They get a playbook, they get some assets out of it, and either they can hire you to basically execute the playbook or they can have someone internally to run that playbook. And so there's a couple of options on how you can go from there. So like I'm not going to say an easy inroad, but it's a way for a CEO to kind of say like, yeah, this makes sense because I get to test you for a little bit to see what you're able to do. We get some deliverables out of this and we go from there. And then as far as engagements, I would say on the minimum, probably 6 months. And then from there, roughly 12 months. And so this is going to be where I look at it as like, you're going to be heavily engaged the first 2 or 3 months because you're executing a lot of these strategies that you've built out. So you're going to be really in there working maybe 10, 15 hours a week, so just to kind of get an idea. And then eventually, as things are running, you're going to start kind of offboarding yourself a little bit, because you don't have to be in there full time, or fully engaged at all times. And so you might say, we're going to be hiring Joey to be running this strategy. They're more of like a mid-market kind of or mid-tier marketing leader. They can help with this. And so you can help with like either bring somebody in-house to start managing that, or you train someone that's already in the team. And eventually you kind of offboard yourself. And so what I love to tell CEOs is like, my goal is to work myself out of a job. And that's exactly how we want to approach it, is that you want to have something that gets you in the door to kind of build some credibility, build some momentum. You want to be able to execute on what you've built out. And then you want to be able to offboard yourself so that the CEO is like, okay, I don't have to pay you all of this money, for a long time, like I would do like a normal true CMO. And so that's kind of the way I approach it.
And to manage expectations, obviously, initially, the majority of the work is in-house. You have to physically go into the office.
I've not gone into an office as a fractional and be like in their meetings. I'm doing all my conversations, Zoom or Google Meets, etc. So you don't have to be in there.
Okay.
The thought that you have to be like always in those situations, I mean, I'm not saying those are bad, but like there are moments where like I talk to some leaders that are like, well, we want somebody that's like, in Dallas, or, I'm in Denver. I'm not going to be going to Dallas. Does that mean that you'll never go there? Not necessarily. Like, does it mean that maybe you go there for quarterly meetings? That's a different conversation. So like you can probably do something like that, but going in, into the office and being into the team, I don't necessarily think that's something that you have to think about, just because we've really, since COVID, like have gone into this more of a, working from home kind of approach and just kind of working autonomously in those areas. I really think that's actually better, because these fractionals are going to bring strategies and ideas that they've seen from other of their clients or what they've launched from previous, engagements, and they can implement that to other companies as well too. It's hard to do that whenever you're localized in one area.
So based on some of the things that you talked about, you mentioned, for example, 15 hours a week up front. Are you saying then that you could do 3 fractional positions at the same time, for example?
Yeah. So that's kind of where like the sweet spot is like if you can get between 2 and 5 fractional engagements, that's kind of where it's at. Now, if you're at 5, you're not doing 15 hours a week for all of those probably.
Yeah.
You're probably doing a little bit less. You're probably doing like 3 to 5 hours a week or something like that. But where I'm getting to is it depends on how you want to kind of like set up your fractional services. But 2 to 3 at 10 to 15 hours a week is a very sustainable thing. What I do think that you want to also consider is putting time aside to do that business development like I talked about. So what you don't want is you don't want 60 hours of doing fractional. And then when are you going to start building your pipeline? When are you going to start focusing on networking? And so you need to make sure you allocate time to do a little bit of both. And so that's kind of, one way of looking at it. The other thing to think about is that you don't want to bring on new fractional engagements all at the same time. So like if you've got 2 prospects that you're talking to and they want to sign up on April 1st, you're going to have to either start one April 1st and say, hey, I've got someone starting literally now. We're going to have to wait about 30 days to get you onboarded. But in the meantime, you can do these things. And then on May 1st, we can kick off our engagement. And so the reason I say that is that usually at the beginning, it's like drinking water from a fire hose. I mean, we all know this as like when you're in-house. Imagine you taking a second job in-house to just because. That would be complete insanity. It could be done. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just simply saying that like if you're trying to spread your load a little bit and just kind of make sure you're not going crazy and putting too much time into one area, then that's kind of the better way of kind of looking at it.
So a lot of our listeners are experienced marketers. Why is right now actually a great moment to consider the fractional path?
The market's really weird right now, as we all probably know. And when I look at fractional, I look at it as a couple of things. If you are wanting to kind of experience the entrepreneurial kind of journey, this is going to give you a little bit of that without going full out, like getting a brick and mortar kind of company. Like you don't have to actually experience that piece. But I really think that going into fractional right now is being more accepted by a lot of leaders because they're realizing that they don't really have enough work or they don't really need a full-time embedded CMO or VP of marketing in their company. And so instead of just hiring a marketing director and hoping that they're a unicorn, and this is not knocking a director, like we all have to go up the ladder. We all have to work our way up. but they don't necessarily have the experience of like building a true go-to-market, building the systems and frameworks. They probably are great at like running campaigns and stuff, and that's fine. But, sometimes like some of these leaders are like, we don't have the budget. And on top of that, like this is becoming more of a common thing. Like we don't necessarily even have to have someone full time, but it would be great to have somebody for 12 months to build that foundation. And as they build that foundation, we can then bring somebody in that's going to be successful at what they've built because that foundation has been built. And that's kind of where a fractional really thrives, is building that foundation. So a lot of the times what I'm experiencing is that some leaders are becoming more open to the idea of bringing in a fractional and then knowing that they can offboard this person and then bring somebody in-house that's going to be successful hitting the ground running, as opposed to like, all right, Tommy, here's the keys, figure it out. And then they're going to get, turned over in about 6 or 12 months because not everything's working correctly.
Anything else to add as advice for people who want to start the path to become a fractional CMO?
I would say if this is something that you're looking or exploring, a couple of things is, number one, start now. Don't necessarily jump ship and actually become a fractional tomorrow, but start building your network. Start actually putting yourself out there. Start talking to people. And you don't necessarily even have to say to them that you're doing fractional work. But what I'm getting to is that like you need to start going out there and building your network and talking to folks and introducing yourself to other people and seeing who else you need to be talking to. So get out there so that whenever you do start making that transition down the road, you have a network of folks that know who you are, what you've done, how successful you've been, what industries you're focused on, what you're looking for, those sort of things. The other part is that eventually you want to kind of start working your way into that. So maybe you take one engagement and that's it. And maybe you do that one engagement at a lesser of what you would probably do, like as opposed to like if you're going to charge, say, $10,000 a month, maybe you do it at $7,000 a month. It's just as an example, but something that is going to be within the time that you can actually do it, and you can kind of start working that piece. So my advice is build your network first before you make any kind of transition, and start kind of, having those meetings, having those coffee meetings and, virtual meetings, etc. And then from there, look at you possibly start engaging in that area. One other piece, what I would probably start doing as well too, is start building your thought leadership, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's you constantly posting on LinkedIn, whatever those little things are, but put something out there that so people can know who you are, what you do, because literally jumping from like not having a network, not having a list, not having like anyone knowing who and what you do except who you're working internally, it becomes a little challenging. And so that way, when people start knowing what you're doing and then you make that transition full time, they've already gained to know, like, and trust you. And that's going to help you make that transition a little bit easier.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights today, Javier. I appreciate it. We're going to provide links to your website, your book, your podcast, and contact information in the transcript. And don't forget to subscribe and share. Thanks for joining.
All right. Thank you, Kelly.